Robb Stark settles into the council chamber at Harrenhal with his wife Queen Talisa. Roose Bolton interrupts them with 2 messenger raven missives, each of which brings bad news. First, Robb's maternal grandfather, Hoster Tully, has finally died after a long illness at his castle of Riverrun. Second, Roose delivers a letter from his bastard son Ramsay Snow, stating that the Ironborn torched Winterfell and put all of its inhabitants to the sword, and then fled all before his force arrived there. There has been no sighting of Bran or Rickon, and though Robb hopes that they are still alive, there is a strong possibility that they are dead. Moreover, there has been no word of Theon, and if he took the boys captive, the Greyjoys haven't sent out any demands. This double blow reduces Catelyn to tears, and she laments that she had not seen her father in years. She is horrified at the thought that Bran and Rickon were in danger while she was away, and could not protect them, and are now likely dead. Robb leaves Roose in command of Harrenhal with a detachment of the Northern Army, while Robb leads his main host back across the Riverlands to Riverrun. Rickard Karstark angrily says that this is a waste of time, though Robb points out that Catelyn's brother and his uncle, Edmure Tully, is now Lord of Riverrun, and his levies will reinforce their army. Karstark maintains that unless Edmure has been breeding soldiers like rabbits, it will make no difference. With their new Tyrell allies, the Lannisters now outnumber them over 2 to 1. Robb asks if Karstark has lost faith in their cause, and Karstark says he still believes in revenge. However, the fact that Robb lost his home castle makes him seem vulnerable in the eyes of his bannermen, and many no longer believe in Robb as they once did. Lord Karstark asks to speak his mind, and says that he thinks Robb lost the war the day he married Talisa. Talisa notices that Catelyn is making a prayer wheel for the faith of the Seven, and offers to help. Catelyn explains that they can only be made by mothers who are praying for the welfare of their children. Catelyn reveals that she has only made them twice before, one of which was when she was praying for Bran to wake from his coma, which worked after a fashion, as he did survive though he lost the use of his legs. Talisa asks after the other time, and Catelyn says that when they were younger, one of the boys had a pox, and Maester Luwin said that if he survived the night he would be all right, but that it would be a long night. Catelyn explains that the boy was Jon Snow, and at first the thought that Jon would conveniently die of natural causes made her inwardly pray to the Seven for his end. However, Catelyn then became horrified at herself for thinking such a thing, particularly as Jon was an innocent child, and the person Catelyn really hated was Jon's unidentified mother. So she made a prayer wheel and stayed up with him all night, praying to the gods that if they forgave her earlier wish that Jon would die, she promised she would urge Eddard to have Jon legitimized as a Stark, and she would raise him as her own son. Jon recovered, however. Catelyn did not keep her promise. In grief at the death of her father and apparent death of her 2 youngest sons, and her continued grief at losing Eddard, Catelyn says the gods are punishing her misconduct with this war. Not too far away in the Riverlands, Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie are heading north from Harrenhal, planning to eventually reach the Red Fork of the Trident River, and then follow it west to her grandfather's castle seat at Riverrun. Off-screen, Arya explained to the boys how Jaqen H'ghar helped them escape, because he offered that he would kill any 3 people she named. Gendry loudly criticizes Arya, in disbelief that she used up 2 of the names on minor Lannister guards, when she could have said someone like King Joffrey or Tywin Lannister and ended the entire war, at which Arya gets quite defensive. However, as they advance in the forest, they run into a scouting party of the Brotherhood without banners, a group of outlaws whose leader, Thoros of Myr, they hear singing The Rains of Castamere as they approach. They recognize them as the group the Lannister torturers were asking about at Harrenhal. Thoros seems a friendly sort, and they make the children come with them. They later give them food and drink at a local inn. Gendry says he used to work as a smith in King's Landing for Tobho Mott, whom Thoros recognizes but says he charged double what the other smiths did. Gendry counters, that's because it was double the quality. Arya insists that she knows how to use a sword despite Thoros' disbelief, but when she tries to mock fence with him, he quickly disarms her. Other members of the Brotherhood return to the inn with a captive, Sandor the Hound Clegane. As Thoros trades insults with Sandor, Arya tries to leave unnoticed, but the Hound stops her in astonishment and asks what in 7 hells they're doing with the Stark bitch, revealing her identity to all. Finally, Jaime and Brienne are slowly making their way across country through the Riverlands, heading to King's Landing, intending to make the prisoner. Exchange for the Stark girls, really just Sansa. Jaime continues to mock Brienne along the way. Brienne is wary enough not to let Jaime out of her sight, even insisting on keeping him on his leash and watching while he urinates, so he doesn't slip away. Jaime deduces that Brienne isn't from the north because he would have noticed her at Winterfell when he visited there. So, as she is from House Tarth, she must be a Baratheon supporter. She angrily denies supporting Stannis, thus confirming that she served Renly. Jaime accurately deduces that she fancied Renly, but points out that Renly wasn't attracted to women so much as he was to Loras. Brienne says she doesn't want to hear his filthy lies, but he says that he knew Renly better than she did, reminding her that both of them spent the last 17 years living in the Red Keep, ever since Robert's rebellion when Renly was just a child prancing down the halls. Jaime insists that Renly's homosexuality was actually the worst-kept secret at court. If she thinks he's lying, he continues to casually mock Renly, which makes Brienne grab him, but he relents and says he doesn't particularly care that Renly loved Loras, as he feels people aren't free to choose the ones they love, which he knows better than most. They come across a farmer with a heavily laden mule, who notices that they're cutting cross-country and avoiding the major roads, and suspects that they're avoiding soldiers. Jaime tells Brienne that he suspects the man is a scout meant to intercept them, and even if he isn't, he can still spread word he saw them. He urges her to kill the man, but she refuses. Later, the pair have to cross a river, which means they can either attempt a dangerous fording or take the bridge, which will probably be watched. Brienne takes the safer route of the bridge, but Jaime manages to distract her long enough to take away her spare sword and cut his bonds. Brienne and Jaime enter into an extended sword fight on the bridge. Jaime starts off very aggressively, putting Brienne on the defensive. However, Jaime's mobility is reduced because his hands are still manacled, and he is malnourished after having spent the past full year chained up in a cell. Jaime begins to tire, and Brienne wears him down further by making body blows with kicks and punches. After a protracted fight, Jaime finally slumps to the ground in exhaustion. Just then, riders from House Bolton arrive led by a man named Locke. Jaime asks if they want to negotiate, but Locke says they'll have his head if he doesn't bring the Kingslayer back to the king in the north. So there's not much Jaime can do to dissuade him from taking them prisoner. Brienne of Tarth. Brienne joins the forces of King Renly Baratheon in the War of the Five Kings. She proves herself by winning a tournament amongst his men, including a victory over Renly's favorite and Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Esser Loras Tyrell. She asks to be named to his Kingsguard as a reward. Renly grants her request, despite her gender and consequent lack of knighthood. Catelyn arrives in the camp to negotiate an alliance between Renly and her son, King Robb Stark. Brienne takes offense when Lady Catelyn does not refer to Renly as Your Grace, and later escorts her and Renly through the camp as they talk. She tells Catelyn to call her just Brienne, as despite her birth she does not consider herself a lady. Littlefinger also visits Renly's camp as an envoy from King Joffrey Baratheon. Renly tells Petter that he does not trust him, and cites Brienne as having true loyalty. This mistrust seems well-founded as Petter offers to open the gates of King's Landing to Renly. While in camp, he also proposes that Catelyn exchange Robb's captive Jaime for her daughters. Brienne also guards Renly during an unsuccessful meeting with his brother, King Stannis Baratheon. Stannis threatens Renly for refusing to swear fealty to him. Later that evening, Renly talks with Catelyn in his tent, agreeing to recognize Robb as king in the north, as long as Robb gives him fealty as an overlord and recognizes his claim to the Iron Throne. Brienne is removing his armor when the flap of the tent flutters, as if the wind has raised it, and Melisandre's shadow creature materializes to stab Renly in the back, running him through. Brienne is devastated at witnessing the death, but recognizes that the shadow had the likeness of Stannis. She cries out and catches him as he falls, getting his blood all over herself. When two other members of Renly's Kingsguard who were guarding the tent rush in, they blame Brienne for the death and attack her. She is forced to kill Rabar Royce and Aemon Kai, and Catelyn convinces her to flee the camp, as she cannot avenge Renly if she is dead herself. Brienne swears an oath of fealty to Catelyn, becoming her sworn sword. They travel back to Robb's camp in the Westerlands. Catelyn is devastated by news that her home Winterfell has been captured by the Turncloak. Theon and her sons made his captives. Robb, still in the midst of fighting for the Riverlands, plans to send word to a vassal in the north, the bastard of one of his commanders, Roose Bolton, to free them, and leaves to negotiate the surrender of the crag. Jaime escapes captivity, killing Torrhen Karstark in the attempt. He is soon recaptured, but Torrhen's father, Lord Rickard Karstark, demands his head in vengeance. Brienne guards Catelyn as she convinces Rickard to await Robb's return. As the hours until daylight stretch before them, the Karstarks are getting more violent and agitated, calling for Jaime's death, as it would be death to try to defend him. Brienne tells Catelyn that at this rate, Jaime will not live long enough for Robb to return.